Hello, this is Christian Glaive, and the title of this PowerPoint is Prometheus and Darkness. So, what will be covered? Lord Byron and Percy Shelley were great friends, and for that reason it can be interesting to compare and contrast some of their works to see the influence that they had on each other. The first poem is by Lord Byron. It is called Darkness. Now, Lord Byron was regarded as one of the greatest English poets. He was the prototype of Romantic literature and a leader in the Romantic literature movement. Darkness is influenced by some of the mass hysteria of an Italian astronomer's prediction that the sun would burn itself out, thus destroying the world. The second poem is by Percy Shelley, and it is called Prometheus Unbound. While Shelley was in a state of despair over the loss of his two children and the failure of his marriage after his third child was born, he wrote one of his greatest works, Prometheus Unbound. Background on Prometheus Unbound, Act 1. So, Prometheus Unbound is the dramatization of the sufferings of Prometheus. He stole fire from the gods and was condemned by Zeus to, Jupiter in this case, and he was condemned to be sat on a rock, and a vulture would feed on his liver for eternity. Prometheus Unbound is broken into 4 acts, but there's only going to be 3 acts talked about. The third act is not important to the discussion. So the scene is set on a ravine of icy rocks in the Indian Caucasus. Prometheus opens by talking about how he has suffered, and he describes the mountain where he is hung. Throughout the lines of Act 1, Prometheus keeps saying, "Ah me, alas, pain, pain, ever, forever." He reinforces the fact that he faces a grim reality of torture, of pain and suffering, in and out. Sorry about that. Prometheus Unbound Act 2. Asia is seeing the Demigorgon, and the Demigorgon is kind of the central enigma. It's the go-to person to ask when you have a question. So Asia tells the Demigorgon all of the good things that Prometheus has done for humans. Prometheus has given them fire, which led to technology, which just overall sparked innovation. So the Asia asks the Demigorgon who has enslaved Prometheus, and the Demigorgon responds by saying that love is the master of the slave. Now, this is the act where everybody realizes that love conquers all, and Asia changes into the naked essence of love and beauty, and she talks about what it feels like to be transformed. In that act, it really sets it apart from Darkness because it changes it a lot. It talks about love instead of doom and gloom. So Act 4 is the final act, and Jupiter has died in this act. And pretty much all of the people of the Earth, the moon, just everything is rejoicing because that tyrant Jupiter is dead. And even the Demigorgon comes out and tells Prometheus that he did a good job, that he was good. So, Darkness. Darkness is a poem with a disturbing twist. The speaker begins the poem as a dream, but not all a dream. Immediately, that causes doubt on everything that will follow. The poet then imagines the end of the world through a series of natural, social, and possibly supernatural events. So the narrator describes all that is seen and talks about what people have become since the sun was extinguished and the stars went black. People lived by watchfires and thrones, and everything was falling to fire. Houses were burning down, forests were burning down, and even people were burning down. All the people thought that the fires would keep darkness at bay, and soon all the animals were killed for food, and the people turned from hunters into scavengers. In the end, there were only 2 men left, at war with each other. Well, those 2 guys died just by looking at each other. Once they died, the world was a void lump. The world was empty, and darkness took over. So, some of the similarities include whose sons are kneaded down in common blood by the red light of their own burning homes. That scene is common in Darkness and Prometheus Unbound. The stories talk about how people stand in awe of burning homes and burning landscapes. In Darkness, the landscape is described as lifeless, herbless, and treeless. And in Prometheus, it is described very similarly. Prometheus describes his landscape as black, wintry, dead, unmeasured, without herb, insect, beast, or shape or sound of life. Now, there is also an unwritten connection between the text. Prometheus stole fire from the gods. And in Prometheus Unbound, the fire is described as science and innovative ideas. But in Darkness, people use the fire to try and stay alive or make life normal. It doesn't really work, considering they all die. So, there are a lot of differences, but some of the key ones are love, hope, freedom, and victory. Now, love is hardly mentioned in Darkness, but in Prometheus Unbound, it's one of the most common underlying factors is that love will save the day. The thing that really sets Prometheus free is love. Prometheus has hope that he will be set free and that humanity will thrive, which they did. And Darkness is the complete opposite when it comes to love and hope. All of the love that there once was has died with the sun, and all that is left is despair and anguish. Yes, Darkness was a upbeat poem. Now, there's no freedom in Darkness, and all the humans are stuck under the rule of tyrannical kings and queens. And while victory is shared, the victory is very different. The victory that takes place in Darkness is the end of humanity, and that victory is one of darkness. It takes over, it controls everything. Now, the endings of Prometheus Unbound and Darkness are complete opposites, and in Prometheus Unbound, the world is set free from the tyranny of Jupiter, and love saves all. But in Darkness, humanity dies, and death and darkness takes over. Alrighty, so goodbye. I'm a little over time, but I think it's fine. There are a few similarities and numerous differences between Prometheus Unbound and Darkness. The similarities lie in how the world is set up, and fire, and what everything looks like. But other than that, everything else is completely different. The meanings, the love, the hope, all different. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.